Welcome to the Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hello, and welcome back to the Truth in My Days Apologetics Program. Today, we have Dr. Adrian Torres speaking with John, and we will continue to explore alternate arguments for the resurrection that skeptics put forward, and why these are not valid. Hope you enjoy.
So that's one reason we can be sure that Jesus was dead. There is a second, and this is the fact that when a victim is nailed to the cross, the respiration must become active. In other words, because of the way the arms are stretched, his position on the cross, he has to keep pushing himself up to breathe. So if he swoons, that is, he goes unconscious, he can't do that. He can't push himself up to breathe, which means either the lack of oxygen will force him to wake up and continue the process so he does not look dead, or he stays unconscious, in which case he will not breathe and he will die. And if he dies, he dies. And if he swoons, he dies. Either way, he's dead. So Jesus died on the cross, and that rules out any sort of swoon theory.
Well, so I think that there's actually no way argue that Jesus did not die. If he did not die from the horrendous treatment he had on the cross, with heart failure and with water in the lungs and with blood surrounding the heart, compressing the heart muscles so the heart cannot beat, then surely the spear is going to kill him. And I believe that they did not break his legs because he was already dead, so they don't have to make him dead. And then the spear is just to make sure. Is that right?
Indeed. That was the whole point of breaking the legs, because at that point, the person would not be able to push himself up to breathe anymore, and he would die. So you would agree that for certain he was dead. And you're a medical doctor, that's your professional opinion?
Yes, and not just mine. If you look into the death of Jesus, there are many doctors attesting how it is impossible for Jesus to have survived the crucifixion based on the facts recorded in the gospel. In order to argue otherwise, you basically have to throw out the historical documents, which is the eyewitness testimony in the gospel.
Yes, there's actually one excellent article on that written by Dr. William D. Edwards called On the Physical Death of Jesus Christ, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, volume 255 in 1986. So anyone who's interested in the medical details really should check that out. So the swoon theory doesn't work. Let's go on to the fifth theory they offer, the hallucination theory. And that's self-explanatory. The idea is that Jesus' followers had hallucinations. Jesus never rose from the dead. He stayed dead, but the disciples believed that he had risen. They saw things that they took to be the risen Jesus, but simply were in their own mind. This hallucination theory is promoted by liberal scholars, including Michael Goulder and Gerhard Ludemann. Goulder suggests that Peter had a hallucination caused by extreme grief. When he thought Jesus rose from the dead, he told the others, and that ended up leading to a mass delusion. Ludemann ascribes it to guilt feelings in Peter and Paul.
Is that a reasonable theory?
Well, it might sound that way at first glance, but when you dig into it, it falls apart. First, hallucinations take place in one's mind, which means they have no correspondence to actual external reality. And that makes them completely unique to the person having it. Different people do not hallucinate the same thing at the same time. And particularly, they do not hallucinate the same things in different groups at different times, in different places, and across extended time periods. I remember that Jesus appeared to the disciples across a period of 40 days in many different circumstances, offering infallible proofs that he had risen. They touched him, they ate with him, they did these kind of things that you can't do with a hallucination. And so the post-resurrection appearances really cannot be explained away as hallucinations.
What else?
Well, as we've pointed out, there have been through history more than 50 Jewish messiahs, 50 people claiming the role of Jewish messiah. And countless other religious leaders throughout history had devout followers who, when their leaders were killed or died, must have had grief and or guilt feelings, yet none of them ever hallucinated a resurrection, let alone made it convincing enough to found a faith that lasted almost 2,000 years now.
Well, I would like to add that just because you have guilt feelings, it is really not a precursor to having hallucinations. People feel guilty, they may be depressed, but it does not lead necessarily to hallucination. And most times, I think it does not.
Yes, I suppose we could point out that people like Goulder and Ludeman are biblical scholars. They're not medical doctors, they're not psychiatrists, they're not psychologists. So their opinions of what could have caused hallucination probably really shouldn't be taken all that seriously.
Anything else?
Well, consider these passages. Matthew 14:26. This is where Jesus was walking on the sea, and we read, "And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, 'It is a ghost.'" And then in Luke 24:36-37, when the risen Jesus appeared to his disciples, we read, "Jesus himself stood in the midst of them, but they were terrified and frightened and supposed they had seen a spirit." So it seems pretty clear that even if they had had a hallucination of Jesus, they wouldn't have thought that Jesus rose from the dead. They would have thought it was a ghost, not a resurrected person. So the bottom line here is that the hallucination theory is a desperate gambit that simply does not accord with what we know about hallucinations and about the facts of the case.
But wait, you said people's hallucinations are personal, so people don't share the same hallucinations.
That is what the experts say.
But what about the so-called apparitions of the Virgin Mary to large numbers of people? Were those examples of mass hallucinations?
There are skeptics who do use the supposed Marian apparitions to try to undermine the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. Dr. Hector Avalos, for example, who posted an online article called "Jesus, Resurrection and Marian Apparitions, Medjugorje as a Living Laboratory," to which, by the way, there is a detailed response on our website. Medjugorje was the site where some of the most famous apparitions took place. But this attempt to compare the two doesn't work. And that's because there are crucial differences between the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus and the supposed Marian apparitions.
What are these differences?
First, let's note that the supposed appearances at Medjugorje began with some personal appearances to 6 specific witnesses. And unlike the apostles, these 6 witnesses had no cost to what they were saying. There was no persecution of them. On the contrary, they profited rather handsomely from these claims, which already raises the possibility of a profit motive in making these claims, which didn't exist with the apostles. And secondly, there are contradictions and actual deceptions in their accounts.
Such as?
There are many of them. One example, one of the witnesses claimed the appearances, and she'd been told by Mary that the appearances would end after 3 more visits. And when they didn't, when Mary kept showing up, she denied ever having said it in the first place. But it had actually been recorded. And when she was told that it was recorded, then she said, "Oh, I don't remember saying that. If it was recorded, I must have said that." Another example, these seers, these 6 witnesses, were supposed to be in a state of ecstasy when Mary was there talking to them. They were supposedly in this state where they were completely oblivious to all sensations, physical sensations, of anything around them. They were completely unaware of what was going on. And yet, one time when they were in this supposed state of ecstasy, they didn't know what's going on around them, one person there made out as if he was going to poke one of the witnesses in the eye, and she instantly jumped back. And when that happened, she was supposed to not know and not see anything around her. She can't know that this guy is poking her eye, but she jumped back. And immediately she was hustled out of the room by her handler, and they returned later, apparently having made up a cover story where she claimed that she'd seen baby Jesus slipping out of Mary's hands and jumped to catch him. And the problem with that, of course, is that then she should have been jumping forward, not backward. So you have these kind of problems, that you don't find in the gospel accounts. Now, some other problems. The appearances of Mary always take place in the same location with the same witnesses. This supposed Mary never attempts to prove that she's physically present. At most, the witnesses claim they touched her robe, but they also described it as metal, which means if they were touching anything, they were touching a piece of metal and thinking it was her robe. Now, these are the Medjugorje appearances. There are the supposed appearances of Mary to crowds. But the problem here is this large numbers of people, some of whom say, yes, we see Mary, but many others at the same place at the same time saying, nope, there's nothing there. Another problem is Mary always appears at a distance. And here's a big problem. The apostles knew Jesus. So they knew him intimately. They spent time with him. So when the risen Jesus appears to them, they know who it is. But none of these people to whom Mary supposedly appears ever knew her. So how could they know that it was her? One witness described Mary as a blue-eyed, rosy-cheeked girl, which happened to exactly match the picture that was on display in her church for a long time before this happened. There's really no chance that the actual Mary looked like that at all. So why does the Mary who appeared look like that? Or why does she claim it looks like that? Because she already has this idea in her mind. And so the Marian apparitions they're phony from start to finish, and they are in no way comparable to Jesus' post-resurrection appearances.
So are you saying that in these Mary apparitions, in the group of people who are there, only some of them claim to have seen Mary, and other people in the actual same place, same time, saw nothing?
It depends on the appearance. With these 6 witnesses, they're by themselves, they all claim to have seen her. And then, as we pointed out, though, there's certain dishonesties in their testimony, which puts the whole thing in doubt. There are other ones where the supposedly appearances of Mary to massive numbers of people standing on a hill at a distance, and a large number of people are there. And yes, in those cases, there are people who say, yeah, we see her. And I said, no, there's nothing there.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but please join us for the next part tomorrow. Same time and same place. If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share any questions or comments you may have. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, MeWe, and YouTube. Simply search Truth in My Days as one word. Again, Truth in My Days as one word, no spaces in between. And you can connect with us. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.